Okay, so in this video, I'm going to walk you through parts of Danette Paul's article, Inciting Chaos, in a little bit more detail, specifically as I see it relating to how you can use her scheme in your MRAD papers, how I'm sort of hoping you'll use her work. So what I want to do first is talk through her scheme, which, as you can see, is all the way down in Appendix C. So here are her words on the practice. So you can find it on page 33 out of 38 of the article, but I also kind of distilled it down in this little slide. That's what it's called. Okay, so I distilled it down in this little slide as well. So Paul talks about features of citations, which is exactly what it sounds like, some sort of thing about the citation that has a feature or some sort of thing about the citation. And the rhetorical practice is the choice that the author makes regarding that feature. So, for example, one feature is a citation, where is a citation located within an article? And the rhetorical practice would be, I as an author choose to put this particular citation in the introduction. The next thing is the method of identifying the citation. And I as an author can either choose to use the author's name in some citation styles, or I might not use the author's name. So another feature is the level of acceptance of the concept cited, and I'll get into a little bit more about that in just a second, but basically Paul relies on this sort of scale of level of acceptance that was developed by Latour and Woolgar, who were sort of philosophers of science. And so one example, the rhetorical practice might be supporting what they call a type 3 statement of certainty, so kind of in the middle, like we're pretty certain about it, but there is the need for it to be cited with a citation. So you say something and you support it with a citation. And I'll get more into that in just a second. And then there's the rhetorical purpose or function of the citation. For example, if you're using it in your introduction in sort of the old news kind of part of your introduction, where you're saying, these are all things that we know about, for example, in Paul's case, citation practices in the sciences. These are all the things that we know about sand dunes or what have you. So that would be the sort of function of the citation. So I'm going to go back to this level of acceptance idea here and show you this little table that I've got. So they have this, again, it's kind of a spectrum, a series of levels. It's not really a spectrum. From type 5, which is like, we all know it, like the sky is blue. We don't even have to say it. We all know the sky is blue. We don't have to say it. And then level 4 is tacit knowledge, meaning, again, we all know it, but it might be written down, but with no reference to origin. So the kind of stuff you see in textbooks. And I guess maybe a better example would be if we're going to walk all the way through this sort of stepping stone, staircase, what have you. And I don't know that I can actually do that with this example I'm about to give you. But so tacit knowledge, if we're reading a textbook about cellular biology, it might say, here are the types of cells in the human body. What you don't have to come out and say is that the human body is made up of cells, right? So if I say something like, here, the human body is made up of these types of cells, implicit in that statement is the fact that human bodies are made up of cells. So that's the difference between level 5 and level 4. Level 5 is you don't even have to say it. Level 4 is it's written down, but we're not going to cite the study that found originally that human bodies are made up of cells. Okay, so again, the kind of stuff you see in textbooks. Level 3 is that we know this exists, but we're going to cite it. So if there's some discovery in the past, blah, 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 years about cells that we need to cite, because we all know it, but it's recent enough for us to kind of have to point to, hey, this person said it, or this person found it. That's going to be a level 3. Now, level 2 and level 1 are where we get into things that we're uncertain about. So, like, things that are still debated within a scientific field. And the difference between these two levels, according to Paul, who is relying on the work of 2 other rhetoricians, whose names escape me right now. I think one of them is Jeannie Fonestock. Anyway, she's relying on their use of the scale, and they are kind of saying that, well, the difference between level 2 and level 1 in the original text of Latour and Woolgar is actually not very clear. So here's how we're sort of operationalizing that. Level 2 is uncertain knowledge, where you might use one hedge. I'll get to what a hedge is in a minute. And a level 1 statement is very uncertain knowledge, where you might use one or more hedge, or 2 or more hedges. So level 2, you're going to have one hedge. Level 1, you're going to have 2 or more hedges. So what is a hedge? A hedge is where you're inserting language that indicates that uncertainty. Or indicates, it sort of softens the firmness of a statement. So if I say something like, actually, let's just go over to her example. She gives a good example. I'm going to have to scroll down to find it, though. Okay, here we go. So, her example is, Feigenbaum argues that period doubling is a route to chaos. So Feigenbaum argues, so the fact that someone is sort of arguing that, oh yeah, someone is arguing something indicates that there's some uncertainty, versus if you just said, where's the type 3 statement? Period doubling is a route to chaos. Bam, there it is. As long as it has a citation with it, that's a type 3 statement. Or Feigenbaum 1978 demonstrated. So that's more certainty than Feigenbaum argues, right? Okay, so Feigenbaum argues that period doubling is a route to chaos. That's a type 2 statement. So there's a little bit of a hedging there with that word argues. Whereas Feigenbaum's recent conjectures, so that's one hedge, conjecture indicates uncertainty, seem to indicate, that's a second level, a second indication of uncertainty. That's your second hedge there, is type 1. So this one, we're really uncertain of this. Feigenbaum's recent conjectures seem to indicate that period doubling is a route to chaos. So those are the differences between those levels of acceptance. So that's one aspect of her coding scheme as well. So in a nutshell, we've got location within the article, whether or not it's named, method of identifying citation, level of acceptance of the concept cited, and then the purpose or function. And I also want to go into the purpose or function a little bit, because she also has a couple of different levels within this part of her scheme. So she says there are 4 different possible functions of a citation in what she focused on. There might be more, but these are what she focused on. So 1 is to create interest, 2 is to give some background, 3 is to indicate a gap, and 4 is to introduce new research. So let us take a couple of examples from her article and see what we can do with this. How can we apply this scheme to citations within a particular article? And I'm going to use this article because you've read it, so we have some level of familiarity with it, but you will be doing this with an article of your own choosing. Okay, so I want to look at this paragraph here that begins, looking at citation patterns provides blah, 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 and that's page 2 on the PDF. So I'm going to sort of scroll down until she actually has a citation. I'm going to skip this one, and then say, yet, as Harriet Zuckerman has noted, citations are only an approximate indicator of influence for aggregates of authors and papers. So her citation here, she's even got a quote, right, is Harriet Zuckerman. This is work from Harriet Zuckerman. So it is, where's the location? It is in the introduction of the article. Is it named? Yes, it is, Harriet Zuckerman. What is the level of acceptance? I'm going to say that because she says, as Harriet Zuckerman has noted, that's just it doesn't really indicate any uncertainty there, but she did name it, and it's not really presented in a textbook kind of way, as just like straight facts. She didn't say citations are an approximate indicator of influence. She said this person noted this. So that's a level 3, I'm going to say. And then what is the rhetorical function? I'm going to say, let's see, as Harriet Zuckerman noted, citations are only an approximate. I'm going to say she's giving background here. So giving background for her research. Let's look at the next sentence, though. David Coffer and Kathleen Carley have argued that most citation studies are not rhetorical, tending instead to treat a text or communication as unchanging over time, and blah, 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 blah. We don't really need to go into the whole part. Okay. So where's the citation? It's in the introduction. Is it named? Yes, it is. We have David Coffer and Kathleen Carley. What level of acceptance is? This one's a little bit less certain because they have argued that most citation studies are not rhetorical. So I would call that a level 2 statement. That's a little bit of a hedge. They're a little uncertain, or it's a little uncertain within the field. And then what's the rhetorical function here? Because she says that most citation studies are not rhetorical, and because we've read the rest of this article and we know that she's positing her own study as a rhetorical study of citations, I'm going to say that this is to set up a gap in the research. So those are just 2 sentences with citations as examples of how you might classify these things. And that's what I'm asking you to do as a group. I want each group member to go through, however you decide to do it, whether you decide to just look at citations in the introduction, or if you want to look through the whole article at all of the citations or what have you. I want you to go through and look and see, pick one or more of these features to identify in your article. And then your analysis will consist of you deciding, okay, basically what we just did, where's the location, or is it named, or what's the level of acceptance, or what's the rhetorical function. And one important thing is that I want all of your group members to look at these same citations. I don't want you to divide up the article and say, okay, you take the citations on page 1, I'll take the citations on page 2, etc., etc. Because what you want to, one of the ways that you provide credibility for yourself in a study like this is to have more than one person look at the same thing and say that we saw the same thing. And the fancy word for that is inter-rater reliability, and there are actually statistical measures to get that, but we're not going to do that in this class because that's a whole can of worms that we don't need to practice writing an MRAD style article. But basically this will give you the opportunity with your group to look through and say, okay, well, here's what I found. And if any of you found, if there is any disagreement between, so say I and my colleague, say my colleague thought this Coffer and Carley sentence was a level 2 citation for some reason, then my colleague and I would have to have a conversation about, why did you think it's level 2? Why did you think it's level 3? And we'd have to come to some sort of agreement before moving on. So that's what I want you to do with your group. And now I know this is not a synchronous class. The easiest way to resolve those disagreements in the coding scheme is to meet synchronously. It doesn't have to be face-to-face, but it can be if you have that ability with your group. But it can also be done asynchronously. It will take a long time, especially if you do it asynchronously. I think the easiest way to do this is to set up a table with every citation in it, and for each group member to sort of put what they think it is in that table. But I also think that you should create your own table first and then sort of collate all your tables after everyone has done the coding. That way you're not influenced by other people's thoughts before you have looked at it yourself. But then once you do collate all of the data, then you can comment wherever you see, I mean, if you get all the data in there and no one has disagreed on anything, well, then you're perfect. But if there are disagreements, then you know where to focus your discussion. And you can basically just use Google. If you want to do it asynchronously, you can use Google Docs to comment on where the differences are and explain your rationale for however you or what you thought it was, and you know, then your group member can say, here's why I thought it this way, and then you'll come to some sort of agreement. Okay, so I hope that has cleared up a little bit of you know, what I'm looking for in this type of analysis, because I'm guessing it's probably something you haven't done before. If it is, awesome. If not, that's okay too. And if you do still have questions about either the you know, Paul's coding scheme or the assignment or what have you, feel free to email me. But otherwise, you know, good luck, and I am really excited to see what you all find.